Jai Hind dear students, I am Dr. Preeti Mittal and today we are going to revise about the sexual mode of reproduction. Why sexual mode of reproduction is required? Is it better than asexual mode of reproduction? So in the previous video we have seen about the asexual reproduction, in which we have seen when only one parent is required for the process of bringing the offsprings, that is producing the progeny, that is known as asexual reproduction. But whenever two parents are required to produce the offsprings, that mode of reproduction is known as sexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction is better as compared to asexual reproduction in terms of variations. More the variations, better are the chances of survival of a species, that we have seen in the previous video as well. So, variations will be more in case of sexual reproduction. But why variations will be more in case of sexual reproduction? Variations will be more because in case of sexual reproduction, we are getting the genes in the offsprings coming from two parents. The genes that are there in the offsprings or in the progeny, that is coming from two parents. Half of the number of genes or chromosomes comes from the male parent, and half of it comes from the female parent. And how these genes are formed, how these gametes are formed, that is containing the genes. The formation of gametes, that is a male gamete and the female gamete. What are male and female gametes? The male gamete in case of plants, it's pollen grain. The male gamete in case of human beings, it's the formation of sperms. The female gamete in case of plants as well as in human beings, we call it as ovum. So, the process of formation of these gametes takes place by a process of cell division known as meiosis. That meiosis is there, I'm writing it here. Meiosis cell division occurs for the formation of gametes, and during meiosis, each of the gametes, male or female, that will be having half the number of chromosomes as that is there in the parent cell. So, as compared to the parent, half the number of chromosomes will be there in the gametes. Now, during fertilization, what happens? A male gamete and the female gamete both fuse together, they join together, and that restores the original number of chromosomes, that restores the original number of DNA in any organism. So, suppose we talk about human beings. In human beings, we have a total of 46 chromosomes. So, 23 chromosomes in us comes from our father and 23 from the mother, and that will combine together, and 23 plus 23, that will again restore the original number of 46. So each and every cell of our body, that is all about human beings, will be having 46 chromosomes, and that is possible because of this process of fertilization, that is fusion of gametes. Whenever fertilization takes place, there is a formation of a single cell that is formed by the fusion of male and female gamete, and that single cell is known as zygote. That zygote only develops, divides into an embryo, and later on the embryo develops into a complete baby plant or a baby organism. Okay, so that is there, that is by the process of meiosis. Now, what is the characteristic of this male and female gamete? Remember, it can come as a 1 marks question. So, the male gamete is usually smaller in size as compared to the female gamete, and the male gamete is usually motile. What's meaning of motile? Motile means it can move about. It can move from one place to another. So, that male gamete is smaller and motile, and the female gamete is usually bigger and has the storage of food. So, females are usually preparing the food. So, in the female gamete only, we have the food storage also. That will be required for the growth, initial period of growth. Fine. So, now let's see about the sexual reproduction in a flowering plant. A flower could be having, a flower performs sexual reproduction. All angiosperms. Angiosperms means flower bearing plants are there. So, angiosperms are having sexual mode of reproduction. These flowers could be unisexual, means just having either the male part or the female part of the gamete, or they could be bisexual. I will be showing you two bisexual flowers with me. I have. So bisexual flowers, the example of unisexual and bisexual flowers is important for exams. What are those? Two you should remember. For unisexual flowers, we have cucumber, watermelon, papaya. These are the examples of unisexual flowers which have just one of the gametes, either male or the female. And bisexual flowers includes mustard, hibiscus. I'm having hibiscus, I'll be showing it to you. Okay, so these are the bisexual flowers which are having both the male as well as the female part of a flower. Fine. Now I'll be showing you the parts of a flower in this as well as along with the diagram. So now let's see about the flower. Okay. So a flower is having at the base, here's a stalk, and then we have the sepal. This green part is known as sepal. In the diagram it's shown here. These are the sepal. Okay, that's green in color. Then we have the colorful part of a flower. Here it's red in color, and that is the petals. These two sepals as well as petals, these are the non-reproductive part of a flower. Then comes the reproductive parts. Reproductive parts includes the male reproductive part and the female reproductive part. Okay. In case of hibiscus plant, we just have this male and female reproductive parts very close to each other. So you can see these yellow structures. So these yellow structures are the pollen grains. These are the anther actually, and these anther contains the pollen grain. The pollen grain is the containing the male gamete. Okay, so I hope you can see that this yellow structures. So these are the anther, and that anther is containing the pollen grains, and that pollen grains is having the male gamete. Okay, apart from that, the top part of a flower, here the tip you can see here, that is having the stigma. It's quite sticky in nature, and so it's known as the stigma. Okay, so the male part, if we talk just about the male part first, we have the male part of a flower is known as stamen, and the stamen is having two parts. One is the anther, the yellow structures that you have seen, and they have a like stalk-like structure which attaches these anther to the base, and that is known as filament. So anther is the upper part that is swollen, that is yellow in color, that is containing the pollen grains, and that anther is connected to the base of the flower with a stalk-like structure known as filament. Apart from that, the female part of a plant is known as pistil. Okay, these style, stigma, ovary, these together are known as pistil. These three together will be known as. How to remember that female part is pistil and the male part is stamen? You can remember that stamen is having men in its word only. So stamen is the male part, and pistil, girls should have a pistol with them to shoot out, so for their safety. So pistil is having three parts. Pistil is the female part, and the female part is subdivided into three subparts. These are the stigma, that is the uppermost part, that is quite sticky in nature. Why it's sticky, I'll let you know. Then it's a tube-like structure, hollow tube-like structure, that is style. Girls have style. And the third one is the ovary. Ovary is the lowermost swollen part, and this ovary only contains the ovule, and this ovule is having the female gamete. Fine. So it's stigma, style, and ovary, that are the parts of the pistil, and the pistil is the female part of a flower. Okay, so if we talk about this flower, so you can see that this flower is having this yellow structures that are the anther. Apart from that, that anther is connected to the base with a filament. here we have the stigma, and over the stigma, if you carefully observe, I don't know it's visible or not, but you can see some yellow powder-like structures because the pollen grains come and stick to the stigma. Then this tube-like structure is there, that is known as the style, and the lower part is having the ovary. I'll just open it up and show you the parts. Okay, so one by one I'll be showing you both the flowers. I'm just trying to open up. Okay, so I'm just trying to open up the inside this style only. When the pollen grain is going to get attached, the pollen grains is going to fall on the stigma, and then a pollen tube develops inside the style. I hope that pollen tube is visible here. So it was a stigma, and this white colored thin structure is visible, that is the pollen tube that was growing inside the style. So when the pollen grain comes and stick to the stigma, that starts growing inside, so that the male gamete that is released from the pollen grains reaches to the ovary, because in the ovary there is ovule. So here you can see the lower part, that is the swollen part, and that is the ovary that is containing the ovule. So this lower swollen part is the ovary that is containing the ovules. The ovule is the female part. Similarly, I'll show it to you in the dhatura flower also. So in the dhatura flower, this green part is a sepal. This white portion is the petals. Now, if I open up the petals, it's very beautifully seen that you can see the. Okay, I'll just open it up. So it's the like one that we see in the diagram now. So here you can see that many structures are there. These are all the this is the filament, and this is the topmost part, that is the anther. Here you can see the anther, and it is connected to the filament that is there, and a single structure you can see here, that is the stigma. Okay, when I just make it like this, that pollen grains are coming into the environment, I can see that dust like structure is there. Okay, so it's a stigma that is on the topmost part, and that is the style, and that will be leading to the ovary. Okay, I'll show you the ovary as well. So if I just open it up, in the lower portion, if I just remove everything, you can see only this. Now this is the style. This is the stigma, this is the style, and the lower portion, that is the ovary. The swollen part is ovary, that is containing the ovule, that is the female germ cell. Okay, so we have seen the dhadura flower and a hibiscus flower. Sorry to these flowers, we have like just cut them open for study purpose. It's okay. So that is about the parts of a flower. Now what happens, that this anther is containing the pollen grains. These pollen grains gets transferred to the stigma, and from the stigma, now when the pollen grains reaches the stigma, this starts growing, and the pollen tube is formed inside the style, and this pollen tube is going to reach up to the ovary. It tries to enter to the ovary and reach the ovule. In the ovule, there is the female gamete, and there will be fusion of the male and the female gamete. Here also you can see that the male gamete is able to move. It's coming from the stigma, entering the style, and then going up to the ovary, but the female gamete is going to be there only. So the male gamete is motile, means it's going to move from one place to another. It's smaller also. Now when it enters into the ovary, then there is fertilization, After fertilization, the first cell is formed, that is the zygote. The zygote then develops further, and this development leads to the formation of the embryo. Later on, a seed coat develops around the ovule. A hard covering gets developed around the ovule, and this ovule only turns into the seeds. So when you are eating any of the fruits, the seed part that is there in the fruit, that is formed from the ovule, that is having that covering around it. Okay, so that ovule gets converted into seed. And what about the fruit? From where it comes? This ovary part, the ovary gives the protection to that seeds, and that ovary is converted into the fruit. So whatever fruit pulp you are eating, that is actually the modified ovary, and the seeds in the fruit are actually the ovule, that is containing the male and the female fertilized fertilized gametes are there, and that is known as the zygote. Okay, I hope that is clear. So remember, as a 1 mark question can come, that the seeds are actually the ovule get converted into seeds, and the ovary gets converted into a fruit. Very important for exams. Now, one more thing, that how this pollen grains are getting transferred to the stigma. These pollen grains, the transfer of the pollen grains from the anther to the stigma is known as pollination. This pollination could be of two types: self-pollination, if it's from the same flower. From the same flower, if the pollen grains are moving to the stigma, then it's known as self-pollination. It could be cross-pollination, means the pollen grains with wind or with water or getting stick to the insect's legs, they come from one flower to another flower, then that is known as cross-pollination. If the pollen grains from some other flower comes to a flower stigma, then it's known as cross pollination. Okay, self pollination and cross pollination are the two types of pollination. Last term related to this is germination. What is germination? Development. This ovule is having this, the seed is having the ovule, I told you. Okay, so when you sow the seeds develop into a seedling. When it is getting appropriate conditions, favorable conditions, then it is going to develop into a seedling, and that development of a seedling from a seed is known as germination. Okay, so when the seed germinates, it forms a radicle, that is a root-like structures, a plumule, that is the early shoot-like structure that will be developed from the seed. Okay, so that's all about the reproduction in flower. That is about this is the diagram. That's a cross section of a flower, longitudinal section of a flower. What's the meaning of longitudinal section? When this type you are cutting something, that is known as a longitudinal section. Okay, the way I have cut the flower, I've shown you, that is a longitudinal section. Okay, now I'll just shift aside. So if you want, you can take a screenshot, but the diagram is the same as given in your NCERT book. That's all for today. Good day, everyone.